Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens after death? What if the truth about heaven is much more shocking than you imagine? Today you will hear the story of Michael Lawson, a skeptical lawyer who died suddenly and had a terrifying vision of heaven and the eternal destiny of millions. What he saw could change the way he lives. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment here from which city you are watching. My name is Michael Lawson. I'm 39 years old. I'm a district attorney in Texas, married and with 2 children, and until a few months ago, if someone had told me that Jesus is real and that heaven is more dangerous than hell, I would have laughed in their face. But now I know heaven is real, and the truth about him is terribly shocking. I grew up in the church. Like many in the American South, I went to services, prayed before meals, said I believed in God, but over time, faith became an accessory, something cultural, convenient. I graduated in law, joined the public prosecutor's office, built my career putting criminals behind bars, and I got good at it. Proud, cynical, cold. God is good, of course, but he wants me to be righteous, not perfect, I told myself, until the day everything changed. It was a cloudy Friday, a big case, a famous pastor accused of financial abuse. The court was packed, journalists everywhere. I had rehearsed every argument, every word. I wanted to win, not for justice, out of ego. It was in the middle of my speech that it happened, a sharp pain in the chest, as if a hot iron passed through my heart. I tried to continue, but my legs gave out. The world spun. I fell right there, in front of the judge, the press, the public. The last thing I heard was someone shouting, "He's having a fit. Call an ambulance." Then silence, but not the human kind of silence. A silence that breathed, as if the air itself was waiting for something. And then my eyes opened. But I wasn't in the hospital. I was in a court made of light. It was gigantic. The walls vibrated with living energy. There was no ceiling, just an infinite sky that beat like a heart. There was a silent crowd, but they weren't people. They were beings, eternals, observing, evaluating, and in the center, a throne. Not a piece of furniture, but one presence that tore me apart inside. I was shaking. I was naked, not physically, but spiritually. Everything I had hidden throughout my life, every lie, every arrogant thought, every secret vice, was there exposed like fire on my skin. And then a voice spoke. Michael. It was as if the truth itself had spoken my name. I fell to my knees. The voice continued. You knew my words, but you never knew me. You spoke of justice, but you never sought mine. I tried to speak, say something, but I couldn't, because at that moment, I knew. My entire life had been a religious farce, a performance, and the scariest thing, heaven knew. When I opened my eyes, I was nowhere my mind could comprehend, and yet, I knew where I was, or rather, I knew who I was in front of. It was as if all human senses had been replaced by something else. I didn't see it with my eyes. I felt with my soul. The light around me wasn't made of photons. It was made of consciousness, of living presence, of truth that burned. The ground beneath my feet seemed to be made of a living substance, a mixture of liquid crystal and sound. Every step I tried to take made my spirit shudder as if I was being judged by every cell in the room. And that's when I realized there was no place to hide there. There was no defense, no legal arguments, no rhetoric, just who I really was. The presence that reigned in that space was unbearably glorious. It was not a human figure with a white beard and celestial robe. It was an authority that went through me like a blade. It was as if the universe itself was breathing through a greater consciousness, and that consciousness knew me deeply. I tried to stand upright, but my spiritual legs, if I can call them that, wouldn't obey me. Everything I thought I hid from everyone, was not others. And it wasn't just what I did. It was the why, the vanity behind good deeds, pride disguised as justice, indifference masquerading as rationality. There, I couldn't say, but I went to church. But on the words had no weight at all. Only the heart had weight. And mine was heavy. There was no fire. There was no screaming. There were no demons. But there was something even more devastating. The look of truth. And that look showed me everything. Everything at the same time. I saw my childhood, the moments when I felt God calling me, and how I became hardened. I saw prayers ignored, people who crossed my path carrying light, and who I despised. I saw opportunities where I could have shown compassion, but I chose sarcasm instead. I saw how I pretended to know God, when in the background I only knew a caricature of him, and then something changed in space. The court has opened, not with doors, but with layers that parted like torn veils. I was pulled, or taken, I can't say, to an even deeper place. There, everything was absolute silence, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was one of reverence, the kind of silence that precedes a revelation that can destroy or save. And then, I saw a room made of living light, not built, but arisen of glory itself. And in the center, a figure. I couldn't see it directly, but you knew who it was. Not because someone told me, but because my spirit bowed before my mind understood. It was him, Jesus, but not the stained glass Jesus, not the Jesus of serene paintings, the Lamb and the Judge, glorious, indescribable. His presence was like ocean and fire at the same time. And just being before him, I knew, heaven is not a prize. It is a place where only what is true can enter, and my truth was insufficient. In that instant, I understood the revelation that burned my soul. It's not hell that scares us most. It's heaven, because the sky cannot be manipulated. There is no room for appearance, not even for good reputation. There, only those who went purified inside. And in that moment, everything made sense. Religion without presence, justice without compassion, faith without surrender. This is all a sham. Before the real sky, I thought being in front of Jesus would be like being in front of an eternal hug. And in part, it was. But it was also like being in front of a mirror that doesn't forgive. There was no shadow. There was no excuse. There was no way to say, but I tried. Because heaven is not about trying. Heaven is about truth. And the truth burns. In that place, there was no judgment with words. There was a revelation, a light that crossed layers of my soul that I didn't even know existed. And the more it crossed me, the more I saw who I really was. Not the prosecutor, not the family man, not the exemplary citizen, but the secret man, the hidden soul, the broken and hardened heart. I saw every empty prayer I said just out of habit. I viewed every judgment I issued against others as if I were a lesser God. I saw the moments when God called me, in the sleepless nights, in the looks of my children, in the tears of my wife, and how I silenced each of them with cold and rational phrases. The light consumed me, but it wasn't destruction. It was purification. It was a fire that did not kill, but exposed. And for a moment I felt like I was going to disappear, not because Jesus rejected me, but because I never gave in. His presence did not scream. He whispered with devastating intensity. It was as if my spirit heard without ears. You thought heaven was a right, but heaven is an extension of my essence, and my essence is holiness. And then I understood. Heaven is not a place, it's a presence, and this presence is too glorious to share space with pride, lies, hypocrisy, arrogance. It was at that moment that I felt something even more impressive. Jesus loved me, deeply, forever, but he wasn't going to force me to love him back. The sky, despite being so immense, does not accommodate those who reject the light, and the worst thing is that many do this, without even realizing it. I thought hell was the place of punishment, but there I realized, the greatest terror of eternity is to be exposed to heaven without being prepared. In his presence, I understood that I had spent my entire life trying to be good enough, but nobody gets there on merit, just for the transformation, for surrender, for complete delivery, and I never surrendered. I saw it in images that weren't images. They were truths that exploded inside me like spiritual memories, like a parallel timeline, where my every step was illuminated by a light that was always there, but that I ignored. And then I saw other souls, lots of, each one before the same fire. Some trembled with joy. Others, like me, they trembled with regret. And I understood there, with pain, but also with clarity. Heaven is not just a destination. Heaven is the place where everything false dies, and what's left after that is who you really are. I thought I had seen it all. That was just the revelation. My soul exposed. The presence of Jesus like a fire that purifies even the bones of the spirit. But heaven wasn't finished showing me the truth yet. And that part was the most painful. Something changed in that glorious environment. Not with sound, not with gesture. It was as if the very space around me had breathed differently, and suddenly I was no longer in front of the throne. The light receded, the glory has diminished, and I was taken, not by force, but by something deeper, to another place. One threshold, a spiritual frontier. It was a region of soft shadows, not darkness, but an eternal shadow, as if the sun was always about to rise but never did. Ali, there were souls, lots of, thousands, maybe millions, and they were all too awake. They seemed to be in such an acute state of consciousness that it was almost unbearable, and it was as if each one was reviewing their life in high definition, but not with their eyes, with their souls. Nobody there screamed, nobody blasphemed, but the entire room pulsed with repentance. It wasn't punishment, era recognition. I understood without anyone having to tell me. That was the place where souls woke up to the truth, too late to change it, but early enough to understand it, by the religious people who attended churches, who spoke about God, who did good works, but their mouths had confessed His name, while their hearts were far away, closed, indifferent. I also saw others, people who had never read the Bible, who grew up without religion, but who, somehow, during their lives, sought the truth. And now they were there, like silently crying, in front of the reality that they had never known, but that they always intuited in the depths of their soul. There I understood that God does not measure appearances. It measures hunger, hunger for truth, for light. For Him, the souls I saw were not in heaven, and they were not in hell either. It was as if they were in a process of absolute revelation. Every thought, every decision, every chance to hear the subtle voice of God, it was all there, clear, inevitable. And then came the part that destroyed me the most inside, because I saw myself, or rather I saw the me that I would have been if I hadn't been interrupted by that cardiac arrest. A man religious enough to seem safe, but empty enough to have never known the true Christ. And then the greatest revelation burned within me like 1,000 suns. Hell doesn't start when you die. It begins when you live without God, and die thinking you are saved. In that place of conscious souls, there was hope, but not hope of deserving heaven, just the hope that God, in His mercy, would do something. I felt like an invader there, as if I was seeing something that was not yet my destiny, but I understood. I needed to see. I needed to know what happens to those who live close to the light, but they never surrender to it. And there, without words, without images, without preaching, the sky shouted a truth that never left me. Eternity begins now, and many are walking towards it with their eyes closed. The transition was so sudden that, for a moment, I thought I had disappeared completely. I didn't feel movement. There was no fall, but something inside me I knew. I was being taken to an even deeper place, darker, and there was no more light there. There was no longer a presence. There was an absence, absolute. The first thing I felt was the empty, but not a physical void. It was a spiritual emptiness, as if every particle of that place was made of what is missing: lack of peace, lack of truth, lack of God. It was as if the environment itself said, He is not here. I tried to look around, but my spiritual eyes no longer saw like they used to. It was all dark, but a darkness that wasn't about color, but about conscience erased. Still, I noticed things, presences, souls, and what I saw broke me. They didn't scream. They were not engulfed in flames as medieval illustrations show. No, they were trapped inside themselves. Every soul there seemed to eternally relive the consequence of your own choices. Some walked in circles, muttering broken phrases. I thought there was time. I knew there was something. Why did I reject it? Why? The sound was muffled, as if everything was underwater. But the weight was crushing. It was like breathing air full of hopelessness. It wasn't punishment. It was harvest. I didn't see demons, but I felt their echo there, like a shadow that has already done its work and is only watching the fruits. There, no one was pushed. Everyone walked there, by choice. Some with pride, others with indifference, many angry, but all with the same consequence. Eternity separated from the one who never stopped calling. And then I understood something even more terrible. Hell is not where God sends people. That's where people come when they spend their whole lives telling him, "Don't bother me." And finally, he respects. I cried. Or rather, my soul cried. Because there, I understood what the perfect justice without active mercy, not for lack of love, but why love never forces. And where love is not accepted, the only thing that remains is loneliness. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that there was still time, that Jesus was real, that he loved them. But my spiritual voice, there was no reach in that place. It was like, there, the choice had already been made. And heaven, the same heaven that is sung about in churches, in songs, in liturgies, it's what hurts the most for those who never really wanted to know him. Yes, hell is terrible, but not by its flames. It is terrible because it is the absence of everything that heaven is, the absence of everything that Jesus is. And when you have this awareness, do you understand? There is no greater pain than knowing that the truth was real, and you chose to ignore it. I don't know how long I remained in that region of absence, because there, time doesn't exist like it does here. Each moment weighs like an eternity, and each eternity weighs like a choice. But suddenly something changed. It was subtle at first. A shudder, a different vibe, not a sound, but something that called from the inside out, as if something that had always known me was looking for me. And then, the light came back, but not suddenly. She didn't invade. She approached with respect, like someone who knows that the place they step on is sacred, even if desecrated by absence. It was like a beam coming from above, a ray of glory descending as if cutting through reality itself. And within that light, a presence. I didn't see him with eyes, but I felt it with my whole being. It was him, Jesus, but now, in a more intimate, closer, more vulnerable way. There was no throne, there was no crowd, just him, and me, and there, where before there was only shame and loss, something appeared that tore at my soul with more force than judgment itself. Compassion. Yes, compassion. Not that distant pity, but a love so ardent, so absolute, which made everything inside me crumble. He didn't need to say anything. Why, his presence said it all. It was as if he said, I saw every choice. I saw every chance wasted. And yet, I came. His light not only illuminated, she restored. And the more I allowed it to run through me, the more I realized what had been twisted inside me. My vision of God, faith, heaven, everything had been shaped by religiosity, culture, trauma, logic. But now, I saw, heaven is not just a place of rest, it's a place of full disclosure, and only those who enter there allows it to be revealed completely. And then I understood something that I had never been taught, neither as a child nor in church. Heaven doesn't begin when we die. It begins when we finally say yes to the light and stop hiding. And this one is not verbal. It's a yes from the soul, an unreserved yes, a yes that says, Thy truth be done, even if it destroys me. In that moment, all the pain I felt turned into something else. In freedom, I was not relieved. I went purified. And there, at that exact point between judgment and grace, between absence and presence, I knew heaven is not for the strong, nor for the good. It is for the broken who accept being remade by him. And in that instant, I finally understood why the truth about heaven is so shocking, why he's there, and where he is. There is no pretending, or do you surrender, or you will be crushed by your own resistance. When the light completely enveloped me, I thought it was the end of the experience. But in heaven, nothing is predictable, because there, every revelation is an invitation, and every invitation demands surrender. The presence of Jesus led me, without words, to a new environment. There was no floor or ceiling. It was like being within the heart of God. It was a living room, pulsating, infinite, made of layers of light and memory. But there, the light did not illuminate objects. She illuminated truths. And then I realized I was entering the room of my own secrets, things that I myself had forgotten, things I buried so deep that I didn't even know they existed anymore. And now, they came to light, one by one. It wasn't torture, a deep cure, but without anesthesia. I saw scenes from my life playing before me, not like movies, but like direct experiences. I felt it all again, but this time, under the gaze of truth. I saw it when I chose to remain silent in the face of injustice. I saw it when I lied to protect my image. I saw it when I looked with contempt at someone weaker. I saw it when I used faith as a shield for arrogance. And the worst, I saw moments when Jesus was there by my side, and I ignored him. He showed me, with devastating love, that each choice carries eternity. Every little decision, every thought cultivated, every secret intention, everything weighs on the spirit. And the sky, contrary to what I thought, it is not built with good public actions, but with internal responses to the silent presence of God. The room became more intense. Lights exploded as if truth itself was cleansing my soul with fire, and at that moment, a sharp pain shot through me. I understood that I spent my whole life trying to be fair, without being holy, because holiness is not a set of rules. It is a heart that beats in tune with His, and I was completely out of step. I saw a specific moment, so simple, so small, that almost made me fall apart. One morning my daughter Ike, I'm still a little girl, came into my office while I was working on a case. She just wanted to show me a drawing she made of the two of us, and I, irritated, told her to leave. In the room of secrets, Jesus showed me that He was in that moment, and that gesture of impatience, however small it seemed, it was the reflection of a soul that had become too hardened to perceive the sacred in small things. I cried. I cried like a naked soul before eternity, because there, I understood the truth that religion often hides. Heaven does not measure our life by the appearance of what we do, but for the depth of how we love. And in that moment, as the weight of my entire story crushed me, Jesus did not move away. He got even closer, and the closer He got, the more shame turned to freedom, because there, in that impossible place, I was being rebuilt from the truth. I thought the highlight of the experience was that room of secrets, but the sky, the true heaven, there is no depth limit. Each time the soul surrenders, a new layer opens, and that's what happened. The presence of Jesus intensified. It was as if every particle around me was alive, vibrating with a music I couldn't hear with my ears, but with the Spirit. And then I was taken, or drawn, to a place that no human words can describe. It was the center, non-geographic, spiritual, the center of glory. It wasn't a room, it was a demonstration, how to be inside a storm of light and love at the same time. Everything revolved around Him. I saw what seemed like thousands, perhaps millions, of beings. Some looked like they were made of fire, others of sound, but everyone was in worship, not out of obligation, but because there was no other possible answer to that. It was not emotional worship, era worship as breathing, natural, instinctive, uncontrollable, and there I realized that heaven is not a reward for the good. It is the inevitable consequence for those who deeply love the presence of God. And the most shocking thing, most of those who say they want heaven, they never desired the presence. I saw this. I saw how many imagine heaven as a beautiful, calm place, with good people. But there, the truth screamed, heaven is unbearable for those who do not love holiness. Because here, everything is holiness in its raw state. There is no distraction. There is no entertainment. Just Him. And either it attracts you with your whole being, or crush you. This is the truth that destroyed me and freed me at the same time. Heaven's reward is God Himself, and for many that wouldn't be heaven. It would be prison. In that place, the weight of glory made me fall again, but it wasn't fear, era recognition. I recognized who He was, and I recognized who I was without Him. But the most shocking thing was what happened next. Glory did not keep me away. She welcomed me, and I understood there, with every fiber of my being. Jesus didn't show me heaven to impress me. He showed me the sky to confront me, because there is no way to maintain the pose. There is no way to sustain the image. There is no curriculum. There is no title. There is only truth. And for the first time in my entire existence, I was at peace with the truth. Not what I said, but what He saw. Glory did not destroy me. She healed me, because only glory has enough power to break the man completely and reassemble him as a son. In His presence, in the center of that absolute glory, I had no more questions. I didn't want to understand. I just wanted to exist within the truth. But then, something changed. The light did not dim. It tore, as if a veil, invisible until then, had been opened before my spiritual eyes, and on the other side, I saw what I never imagined possible. The prayers. Yes, the prayers. They were not in words. They were in the form of light, thousands, millions, like little comets flaming towards the heart of God, each with an origin, a tear, a muffled scream, a silent sigh in the early morning. And Jesus listened to them all, but I didn't just listen, felt. He carried those prayers like living brands, and there I understood. Nothing is forgotten in heaven. No sincere prayers, no real regrets, no whispered cries for help in the dark. Everything was kept and responded to in ways we never understand in this life. But there was something more, deeper, more urgent. I saw what looked like a spiritual multitude, an entire generation, living as if God were an idea, not a person. Cold religious people, distracted agnostics, wounded atheists, all connected by one thing. They ignored eternity. And then I saw something that shattered me. Pulpits lit with artificial light, but spiritually erased. Empty sermons, rituals without presence, faith without fire. And there I heard, not with my ears but with my soul, a declaration that cut through my being like a sword. They worship me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. And then, the vision intensified. We the sleeping church, dressed in white but with her eyes closed, and around her, the world on fire, calls of confusion, of fear, of deception. And yet, she slept. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake her up, but there, he could only observe. And then I saw what seemed like the beginning of something new. An ember, alone, little, but real. And from that ember, the fire began to spread. Not in the big temples, not in auditoriums, but in dark rooms, prison cells, hospitals, alleys, schools, forgotten places, forgotten people, but with awakened hearts. And Jesus smiled, not with triumphalist joy, but with a smile full of hope and pain, as if to say, they still look for me, they still want me, and for them, I will manifest myself. At that moment, I understood the purpose of my experience. I wasn't there by chance. I was there to see, and to remember, and to tell why heaven is ready. But the earth is asleep, and Jesus doesn't want impressed crowds. He wants surrendered hearts. In the fullness of that place, when I thought nothing more could be revealed, he spoke to me, not with voice, not with audible words, but with something so intimate, so absolute, that my entire being bowed before I even understood. It was like an eternal breath within the soul, a message that asked for no response, required transformation. You saw, now, you know, and who knows, and you might no longer live like someone who ignores it. His presence invaded the deepest part of my spirit, not as an imposition, but like a calling that it cannot be refused without eternal consequences. There, I understood, heaven is a real place, holy, terrible in its glory and absolutely pure. But what shocked me most, it was knowing that he wants to take people there who are still lost now. People like me were arrogant, skeptical, religious but cold. People who believe in God with lip service, but never truly prostrated himself before him. I saw their faces. I saw your empty eyes. I saw their souls on the thread of eternity, without knowing it. And I understood the biggest scandal in heaven. He still loves them, with a love that doesn't give up. A love that descends to places of absence, to light a single ember, the ember that can turn into fire, the fire that can awaken those who sleep. He didn't show me the sky out of curiosity, not even for me to return as a spiritual guru. He showed me heaven because many are going to hell, thinking they are going to heaven, and it tore me apart. It destroyed me, rebuilt me. I didn't see a fairy tale place. I saw neither harps nor clouds. I saw an unshakable kingdom, where only the truth can enter, and this truth has a name, Jesus. Not a concept, not a symbol, but one, a living, burning, glorious person. And he marked me. It marked me with fire, urgently, with mission. And the mission is simple, but heavy as the sky itself. Tell them I'm real, say I'm coming back, and say that the time for religiosity is over. Now, it's either total surrender, or it's darkness. And then, without warning, I was pulled back, not with violence, but with a streak of light that took me away from that glory, But something remained. Something burned in me. Something no language can describe. I saw the sky, and the truth about him is shocking, because heaven is not for those who think they deserve it. It is for those who can no longer live without him. And if you're still alive to hear this, there is still time, but not by much. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.